Good afternoon, this is Gary Jones and you are listening to the UK Genesis podcast, the show that introduces web professionals from the UK who use the Genesis framework for WordPress. This is episode number 14. My co-host is Joe Waltham. Hi Joe.
Hiya. Hi everyone.
Take the focus off of me. Hi Joe, try that again. Make sure it switches to you.
Hello.
There we go. And today we've got an amazing guest. We've got Gavin Preece joining us today. How are you doing, Gavin?
Very good, thank you. Very good.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. And also thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask Gavin, then please ask them on Twitter. Send it to UK Genesis account if you don't want your tweet to be sent to all your followers, but make sure you include the UK Genesis hashtag, because that's what we look for. So, Gavin, for those who don't know you, can you give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Gavin, obviously. I'm based in South Wales, from Caerphilly originally, but the office is based down in Newport, which is just outside of Cardiff, probably about 5 miles. I've been down here now for about 3 or 4 years. In general, I've been working in web development for 7, 8 years, maybe a bit longer. I've kind of lost count, to be honest with you. And yeah, you know, we cover a whole gamut of kind of web development. Genesis is my framework of choice, and that's what we use for the majority of our builds. But we do an awful lot of design work as well. So we do kind of print work, you know, brochure design and flyers and banners and all of that kind of thing as well. So we're quite a small team, and there's about 5 of us in total. And yeah, that's a brief overview really of who we are.
So what is your main business? You talked about the design, but you also do websites. Do you do other marketing and SEO, things like that?
I tend to steer away from SEO, mainly because I find it really mundane and boring, if I'm honest. We kind of obviously build in SEO to new sites that are being built and make sure that things are functioning correctly. And we'd be quite happy to take on, I suppose, what you'd class as small SEO projects. So where we've got clients that have had sites built and they just want kind of localized search to appear in localized searches. We don't mind managing that, but anything larger we tend to outsource, to be honest. I enjoy the kind of companies that we predominantly work with. I suppose you class as SMEs, so they small, medium enterprises. And my kind of primary job role, if you like, is web development. That's what I really enjoy. So even though we incorporate lots of other bits and bobs, it tends to be web development is my baby, and that's the thing that I enjoy doing the most. But I kind of oversee all of the other design work as well. So within the office, there's me, and you can probably see Nathan's head in the background there. Nathan is, I suppose, an apprentice, and he's kind of starting out as a developer at the moment. And he's been with me now for about 4 or 5 months, and things have worked out really well. And then there's 4, maybe 5 freelancers that I'm really friendly with, and we kind of collaborate on projects. So where something falls out of kind of, I suppose, my area of expertise, we kind of utilize other people to come in and help with that. So we've got somebody that specializes in branding. We've got somebody that specializes in JavaScript in particular, because I'm quite weak with JavaScript, if I'm honest. We've got Sean that manages databases and generally stuff that might be outside of SQL databases. So she works with kind of access, and because it's surprising, we get a lot of requests for databases to be built, you know, kind of using Microsoft products. So she manages that, and then we've got somebody then that does low-level social media accounts. So, you know, just keeping them ticking over, daily tweets, Facebook, status updates. But as I say, nothing, you know, for kind of a large scale. If any kind of large corporate clients or anybody else, we tend to outsource it. If they came to us, we would tend to outsource that level of work, because we just can't, we can't cope with it. You know, it would be too much for us to take on with all the other projects we've got on the sideline. It's really difficult for us to obviously incorporate it into the workflow.
We've got an early question from Angie. Thank you, Angie. She asks, who do you sub out your SEO to?
We've got, there's a company up north which are called McConnell's, They're a PR media agency, and they're very, very good at what they do. So we've always had a kind of a mutual, I suppose, understanding in that I've always kind of troubleshot WordPress for them. So whenever there's issues in terms of web builds or something that, because they've got the capacity in-house to kind of put together HTML, CSS, but then they kind of struggle with any kind of PHP or functions or anything that's kind of out of a theme setup. So we kind of troubleshoot or duplicate sites for them, and that was one of the reasons, I came across Genesis in the first place, because I used to use the Catalyst framework. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the same company, Cobalt Apps, that were behind the dynamic website builder for Genesis. Now they're the Catalyst framework. And then any, as I say, large-scale SEO, we would probably outsource to McConnell's, or we get in touch with those then to kind of run those projects, because they've got an infrastructure that can cope with it. And PR and media is their predominant thing. So even though they dabble somewhat in web development, they tend to outsource that, whereas their SEO and their PR and their media is all in-house then.
And do you provide training to your clients as well?
To a degree, yes. So whenever there's a build and we complete a build, we will generally spend a kind of a morning or an afternoon going through, the back end of WordPress, how to edit pages, how to edit posts. But what I find is a really handy tool, and I find myself doing more and more these days, because a lot of our work is kind of either overseas or we've got a real mix. We have got local companies, but I don't know how people have come across us. I suppose it's just word of mouth, kind of somebody knows somebody who knows somebody, and before you know it, you've got inquiries coming from places, up in Scotland and all over the place. So I do a lot of work for clients that aren't, within the area. So what we tend to do then is put together screencasts for them. So whatever the particular problem is, we put together small screencasts. I've got a little support folder on the server that they've got their own little access to. And as I say, I can just paste them the link then to a screencast explaining how to do whatever it is they're looking to do. We recently done a series of them for a company. The website's ns-online.net. They're a school uniform company, a small company, and they sell to all, obviously, the local schools within the area. And we put together a series for them, of how to add a variable product. And because I think sometimes you can be a little bit guilty, or I certainly can be a little bit guilty, of assuming that people have a little bit more knowledge than what they actually have with WordPress. I think when you work with something day in, day out, and I turn around to somebody and say, well, it's easy, all you need to do is X, Y, and Z. And then, you get an email back in or a phone call, and, it's not quite as easy as what, because of their level, a lot of these people are seeing WordPress for the first time, aren't they? Whereas to us, it's natural to head into a post or page and edit. But like I say, screencasts, they're a lifesaver, because like I say, it bridges that distance, and then they can leave feedback on it, and I find it's a really good tool. So we do offer training, not commercially as such, so we don't offer kind of training days, per se with WordPress. But any jobs that we do or we complete, we always make sure that we spend at least half a day to a day, if not more if it's required, and we tend to build that into the proposal. So if it's something where they've got somebody in-house that wants to manage an awful lot of the site themselves, so basically the only thing they would kind of come back to us would be for like structural changes. Then we build an SLA service level agreement with the client, and we would incorporate a couple of days training into that. And then, it would either be me who would go out on site with them for the day, or they'd come down to the office, or Nathan's running a few now. Just like I say, just to get them familiar with the back end, really.
Yeah, I find that as well. I've got clients who you do the training, and then they come back to you like 3 months later, and it's the first time that they're trying to. I had one come back to me the other day, and she was saying, "Can you tell me how to put the gallery back in again?" and things like that. So they kind of forget about it. They kind of know that they can do it, but they can't remember the details.
And this is it, isn't it? And this is where I think sorry, Gary. This is where screencasts are brilliant, because you almost build up a little library for people, because very often somebody will come in for the morning and they kind of nodding, yes, I got that, and they'll kind of add a product themselves with you, but by the time they leave, it just goes straight and it's gone. It's kind of in one ear and out the other, because they've had so much to try and absorb that they just don't absorb it. So I find that a screencast, it takes less time to do than to actually go to a client. You know, it's kind of 5 minutes a cast or 6 minutes a cast, and then they've always got that as a reference, so that if they don't touch the site for 6 months, they can still jump back in, find the email where I sent them the link, you know, and then they can add their images, add their gallery, and so forth. So, as I say, it's a massive time saver for us, massive.
That sounds like a really good idea. So, what is your usual workflow from when the initial lead comes up to delivery?
First thing is generally initial meeting, just to kind of get some base information, or it may be a conversation depending on distance and everything else. We run through a design brief, so we've got quite a comprehensive design brief. It's probably about 20 pages, 30 pages. I'm quite happy to make it public if anybody wants a copy of it, just to have a look. You know, it may suit, give you, you know, some ideas for your own brief. But we tend to run through information as we possibly can from the client. Once we come back, we'll sit down as a team. If there's more than one of us going to be working on the project, we'll sit down, run through it, and then we produce a scope of work. So our proposal system, we move it into proposal, and we also put in a full scope of work so that the client is fully aware of kind of, you know, everything that's going to be, you know, included within the site, that there's no hidden gotchas. And not just that, it's a really good exercise for us, because running through everything in great detail makes sure that obviously we aren't promising to deliver something that maybe, and I'm sure most of you have taken on a project at some point that you thought would be a walk in the park, and then you get 3/4 of the way through and you think, oh no, you know, what on earth am I going to do with this? So scoping it out, it kind of obviously gives them a real good idea of everything that's going to be contained. And then it's really helpful with those more difficult clients that you come across as well, because you can refer back to the scope and say, well, look, guys, you know, you've kind of ticked this off, and you know, this is what we proposed was going to be built. So we go to proposal. Once the proposal gets signed, we generally start wireframing. We use balsamic mock-ups. I don't know if you've heard of it for wireframing. I love it. It's really crude and kind of almost cartoon designs. We used to make PSD s, but I find these days they're more of a hindrance than a help, purely because CSS is so good these days. You know, the days of kind of slicing up a PSD, we just don't do it anymore. So before, when we used to build the PSDs, they obviously were really handy for when you actually took it into development, but now we don't find that. So we tend to wireframe it out. People can have a PSD if they want one, but as I say, we tend to just wireframe it. Once they've agreed the wireframe, we start the build basically, and then depending on, you know, the level of build and how much work needs to go into it, we tend to start with function building. So we get all of our functions in, and then, you know, styling we kind of leave, you know, until a couple of weeks in. Once all our base functions are in and, you know, the framework is in, we then start styling on top of it.
Okay. And do you use any particular tools for managing the project or invoicing and time tracking, that sort of thing?
I am a bit of a software junkie, I got to be honest, and I just kind of collect applications, because I always think that if something shaves off 10 seconds off my day, well, it's for the greater God, you know. So I am a software junkie. At the moment, I'm using, and I've literally just switched, I was using Billings Pro to manage the invoicing and time tracking, but the time tracking is really poor on it, to be honest. It's not great. And not just that, I'm not a big lover of this whole subscription software kind of realm we're moving into. So I've still got Billings running, but I'm using one for the Mac at the moment called Profit Train, which is actually really nice because it's got a to-do list built into it, but the to-do list that you build, that you can also use them as a time tracker, so you can, you know, click to activate the timer, and it's really, sorry, excuse me,
Right.
phone is still linked there to the Mac. So yeah, we use Profit Train at the moment, and yeah, I really like it. The invoicing isn't that neat on it because they're HTML invoices. And they take a bit of work to style up, so it's not quite as easy to work with as, say, something like Billings Pro. But you can sync it across devices, because I work off a couple of different computers, so you can sync it across devices, and it works really well.
I'm going to probably say another question, but how do you remember to actually track the time? for me, though, I find that the trickiest bit is if I've got the timer open, I'll think of it and I'll do it. But otherwise, I could be doing work and then kind of getting distracted with something else, and you think, oh, I need to go back and work out how much time I actually spent doing that.
I wish I could tell you I had a kind of a good solution for this, but I haven't. The time track jobs that we do, they're very minimal because very often we tend to take jobs on in bulk, you know, so it's kind of a fixed cost, and, you know, regardless of what time is spent on it, that's the cost we've agreed, and that's what we put forward. I've got a client that we work with over in the States, and it's an agency, and all of that is time tracked. So I suppose it's quite easy in the sense that we've only got 1 or 2 contracts where we have to, you know, really time track and make sure that the logs are all correct for payment. All of the others, to be honest with you, are relatively, as I say, they're all fixed fee. So it's just those small projects really that, you know, and it tends to be bug fixing or, you know, theme updates or a site's been hacked. Those are the kinds of jobs that I tend to do hourly rates for, because again, you just don't know how long those kinds of jobs are going to take. You've got no, you know, it might be a 5-minute fix, but then it might be 5 days. You know, you just don't know until you get into it, do you?
Yeah, one of the questions that we just kind of spoke about, Andy says, how do you manage your kind of subcontractors and the projects that those subcontractors might be doing multiple projects for you?
We've got, generally it's via, we have almost like a Monday morning meet via Skype just to catch up on where everything is. Again, we don't tend to take on that many projects in one go because my ethos has always been we're not into quick turnover. We take on kind of 2, maybe 3 builds a month, 1 big project, and then maybe 2 small projects, just to kind of give us a bit of variation, so that when you kind of hit a wall with the large project, you can jump into something else and still get work done. So it's relatively easy for us to manage in the sense that we've only got 2 or 3 subcontractors. We have a check-in on a Monday morning, and to be honest, the rest of it is done via email. So we don't use a piece of software, you know, to kind of manage the team or anything else. We use either Box or Dropbox for syncing files. Box have got a nice little feature where you can kind of add notes to files and folders and whatnot. And I think Dropbox have recently introduced something similar, I believe, where you can add kind of comments onto things. But like I say, the rest of it really is done via email and Skype. So whenever there's a problem, you know, we'll kind of hook up, have a 20-minute Skype conversation and move on with things.
Cool. We've got a couple of other questions coming on Twitter, so we'll cover those now rather than our kind of fallback questions. Andy wants to know, why Orangedrop? Why the name Orangedrop?
There was a picture that I really liked as a child, and I can't even remember where I saw this picture, and it just stuck with me. And because the history was that I fell ill when I was around 25, and I've got a genetic muscle disease, and it's really boring. But I basically can't do anything physical. I need to take morphine 4 or 5 times a day. So anything physical, like walking or even sitting, you can probably see my chaise lounge in the background there. That's my downtime when sitting on, you know, on this chair gets a bit too much. So when I hit kind of 25, I decided that I wanted to go into this line of work because I'd always coded and I'd always kind of developed really, but for people that I knew when it was friends and family and small websites. And it started with the ZX Spectrum way back when in the 80s. That was my first love of computing, and it kind of built from there. So I changed career paths quite dramatically, to be honest, because I used to have a consultancy company, and it changed paths due to my illness and everything else. So I thought, well, let's go down a path where I can really manage my time and have kind of chill out time. And it all came down to when I was looking for a name for the company, you know, and I had a look at what was in the area, what else was, you know, you do your market research, don't you? And I thought it'd just be nice to have something a little bit funky and fresh. And the first thing that popped into my head was this image. It was a painting of these kind of orange blobs, and it was called Orangedrops. And it just kind of stuck with me. So that was the reason behind the naming.
Yeah, I think when we had Angie on back in, I think it was episode number 5, she said when she was picking her name, Purple Baby Hippo, that apart from the fact she did have a small toy purple baby hippo on her desk that she'd got a child, or a child got her, that in terms of kind of a good naming strategy is kind of to pick a color and to pick something that you can kind of identify, or not identify with, but is something visual, so something that you could easily put a brand around in terms of the logo. And so Orangedrop and purple baby hippo are kind of certainly meet those kind of criteria.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the colour orange has obviously got lots of association with kind of being relatively affordable, good value, fun, you know, all of those kind of words are kind of associated with orange, and it just seemed like a really good fit, because the whole intention of setting up the company, when I had the consultancy company, I used to do a lot of kind of freelancing for other agencies, but never under my own branding. So they would kind of obviously sell on any work that I did, and, you know, it would always be under the guise of their agency. So back in about 2007, I think it was, I thought, well, why am I doing this for other people when really I could brand myself and have my own company, you know, doing what I love doing, basically. And yeah, so that's where it came from, really. It was a picture that I loved, and yeah, it kind of stuck with me, and the orange and the colour and everything, it fitted with what I wanted it to.
So who's your target audience? Who do you particularly market your business to?
It tends to be, as I say, small, medium enterprises. So we have got a couple of large corporate clients that we do, and again, you know, not major works. I wouldn't say we complete major works for them, but we do small print runs and, you know, website edits, and very often we tend to be pulled in where they've had a bad experience with another agency, you know, in terms of turnaround when there's been issues with things. So I would say it's small to medium enterprises, and it goes really anywhere from kind of, you know, the one-man bands, you know, that kind of do electrical work or gas fitting or whatever it may be, right the way through to, you know, we've got companies on the books, I suppose, that employ, you know, a couple of hundred people. So there's a real variation. I wouldn't say that we look, because I know that some agencies go down this very specific route, don't they, of kind of food agency, you know, so every website they produce or every, you know, kind of brand, it's all food related, and you've got others for finance. And whereas, like I say, we encompass everything, really. We're not specific or tied to one area, and as I say, we know our limitations. I know what we can do and what we can't. And I'm quite happy to hold my hands up when there's a job that comes in that I think, do you know what, this is going to be way above what, you know, what we can deliver or what we could do, because I don't think it does anything for your reputation, does it? If you take on projects and then you let the client down the other end, you know, it's not good for you. You only need to do that once, and before you know it, you know, your name gets tarnished pretty quickly. So we only ever take on work that, you know, we're 110% confident that we can deliver, and that they see a return on their investment as a result of it. So yeah.
And how do you see your business growing in the next 12 months? What's your plans?
I would say that I'd like eventually to have another developer on board in-house. I think 3 people in the office, that for me would be an ideal number. Because what I find happens with me an awful lot is that I end up spending so much time doing administration tasks and so much time meeting people and generating new work that I haven't got time to do the work that I've actually got on the books, and it's a real difficult, and I don't know how everybody else kind of copes with this, but I'm sure you're all in the same boat. I find myself spending so much time, as I say, just admin and meetings and, you know, kind of tutorials and teaching people how to run their sites that are already being built. So I would like to see another developer in-house, because I don't want to lose that client relationship that I've built up with my client base, because, and I know this, I don't want this to sound arrogant, but people generally come to us because of me, because it's always been me. Orangedrop was me, you know, there was nobody else, so people tend to come to me for me, and I don't want to lose that kind of personal. And I think the moment that you start bringing in staff, and you know, they kind of, when they ring and they want to speak to you, and, you know, there's somebody else answering the phone, not that it's a bad thing, but I just like to, I'm terrible, and I know I should cut the apron strings at some point if I want to grow, but I find it really difficult because I'm so finicky about things. You know, that I'll get up and change a pixel at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, because I can't sleep, because it's rattling in my head. So I am really finicky with things, and I know I need to leave a little bit go. So what I would like to see in the next 12 months, to answer the question, I'm waffling quite a bit, is I'd like to see another developer in-house, so it frees me up a little bit more, and that my time isn't quite as pressed as what it is. I've never wanted to be a large agency, and I've never been greedy. Our pricing structure is really fair, you know, and if you compare it to other kind of agencies in this area, I mean, we kind of half the price by comparison, you know, and that was the whole intention of Orangedrop in the first place, really. Within this area in South Wales, there was a gap I felt in the market where you either went to somebody, for instance, like Stills Design, that would charge you 18 grand for a 5-page website, or there was Dave up the road, who was this, you know, kind of custom WordPress developer that basically would buy a theme forest theme for $30 and charge the client £350 for the website. And there was no middle ground. You know, there was no kind of people that still appreciated good design and, you know, I suppose well-coded or well-put-together websites, but didn't want to use Dave up the road, but couldn't afford the Stills Design agency kind of environment. So I wanted to be that kind of middle ground where people would receive really good value for money for what they get. Yeah, so as I say, it was to get that middle ground, really. That's where I wanted to be. I kind of lost track of what the question was now, sorry.
No, I think you answered that. What size of projects, question from Russell, what size of projects do you prefer to deal with? Kind of what is too big, what is too small? Is it kind of 3 days, 10 days?
It's generally anything, really. It's not necessarily the time of development, because we've recently just built a site now, which I know isn't WordPress related. It was built on the Adobe Business Catalyst platform, and that took us a year to build. It was a phenomenal big project. It was a monster. So we don't kind of gauge it, if you like, with time. It would be more along the lines of, is it within our capability? I always try to, with every job I take on, build something into it. So it means that I'm constantly developing. I don't like to stay safe. So I do like to take small, and I say this, you know, kind of calculated gambles with things where I think, well, do you know what? I think I could actually do that and we could achieve it. But it gives me a learning curve along the way. You know, we never charge the client for the learning curve, but it doesn't feel like you're taking up your personal time in learning something when it's something on a project. Does that make sense? You kind of get that, you know, freedom within the, you know, the build itself. So yeah, as I say, we don't necessarily gauge it in terms of time. We don't mind taking on, you know, massive builds. It's more whether we've got the capability to deliver it, or whether it's something outside of our area of expertise, because we've got a build on at the moment where we've got to link to the Auto Trader API, and that was a bit of a head scratcher, to be honest, because we haven't worked with the Auto Trader API before, and that's one we're looking at the moment. And again, it's potentially a very big build, but it'll be interesting, you know. So we just need to make sure that we obviously cover all our bases beforehand, and make sure that we're, you know, confident that we can deliver it before we kind of agree to it and propose the work then.
It sounds like you spend quite a lot of time on your proposals and all of that side of it first.
I do, and the reason for that is I believe that over the years I've won an awful lot of work because of the time and attention to detail that I put into my proposals. I mean, I've seen some horrific. Actually, one of our clients came in yesterday, and they'd had this proposal from some direct online marketing company, and the proposal was built in PowerPoint, and it was just, you know, you looked at it and it just smacked amateur. You know, it was really bad. And I mean, they weren't charging amateur prices, you know, for the services they were delivering. And I just think, you know, it's first impressions, isn't it? And I think that if you create a good first impression, and what I want is when somebody has got 3, maybe 4 proposals in front of them, I want mine to stand out over the rest, where it does come and bite me on the backside sometimes, mind, and I can't deny that, where, you know, you've spent an awful lot of time proposing something and spent a day drafting something together, because it's quite a substantial chunk of work, maybe, I don't know, a 3-month build. And then only for that to kind of, you know, come to nothing and not even a thank you. And that's what grates me more than anything else, you know, is when you've taken the time, you've been through a brief with somebody, you've had the meetings, and you go to propose, and they haven't even got the common courtesy just to say, well, thank you, you're a bit expensive, or it's not what we were expecting. So it has got its drawbacks as well, spending that amount of time in kind of proposal building. And I've never really found quick or easy solution around it. I did use the system called Quote Roller, which was thereafter, but it was really basic and plain, and even though you could do certain amounts of styling with it, it still wasn't what I like my proposals to look like. Is it looks like they've been produced by a graphic designer, you know, it's not just a standard kind of proposal format, it's something that's unique to us. And hopefully when you've got the client that's got 4 or 5 proposals in front of them, yours is the one that kind of stands out in the pile.
So how long would you normally spend on doing the proposal, you know, the brief, the discovery, the proposal?
Again, it's depending on the level of work that I feel could result from that proposal. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I can put together a proposal in maybe a couple of hours, you know, because I've got all my templates set out and all of my kind of copy and paste in. I've got a lot of generic stuff there. So I would say that between a meeting, but I suppose when you add the meeting in, I suppose you're always looking at a day, really, aren't you? Because by the time you meet with somebody for the morning and then come back to do a proposal, I suppose it's a day even for a basic proposal. We do quick estimations of work and things like that, and I mean, they're neither here nor there. But for a large build, I've seen me before now spend maybe 2 days, maybe longer, on a proposal, but that would be, as I say, for a real substantial chunk of work, you know, kind of £10,000 plus then.
Okay. How do you decide which projects go in your portfolio?
If you want the honest answer,
yeah,
it's basically the ones that don't screw up my design once I finish. Those tend to be the ones that I put in. Unfortunately, with WordPress, you know, as you all know, you can't govern what clients do at the end with the work that you've produced. And unfortunately, I've had some really what I thought were amazing designs. We built a site for a client in America, and they're a massive client. And they stock in Staples, in Walmart, so they're a real well-recognized brand. And what they did to the website after we'd finished it reduced me to tears, and I've had to leave it out of the portfolio for that reason. But I think it's just about getting a nice mix, really, isn't it? And kind of, you know, from different sectors, totally different kind of businesses. I think your portfolio should reflect all the different skills you have to offer. So it's just, for me, about having a real good mix of clients. Because we recently, I'm really guilty of neglecting our own website, to be honest. And we lost a job going back a little while ago, purely because the website was out of date and it was poor. It was poor because it was built kind of 7-8 years ago. The original, it was the first kind of, I suppose, it was when responsive design really first came into the arena. It was the first responsive site I'd ever built, and it was really poor. But the site now I've built on top of, it was actually one of the Genesis starter themes that I really like, the Altitude Pro theme. Yeah. It was built on top of that. And like I say, when we came to the portfolio, we've recently updated it, and one of the things is let's get a bit of a mix out there. So there's a bit of branding, there's a little bit of web development, and it was just to give people a flavour of what we do, really.
What was it, since you mentioned it there, what was it that attracted you to the Genesis framework? What benefits do you think it gives you and your clients?
Initially, I honestly thought nothing, and I actually disliked the Genesis framework, but that was my naivety and my lack of understanding of the framework, purely, you know, it was ignorance, basically. It was pure ignorance. Because I used to work with the Catalyst framework, as I mentioned earlier. That was one of we used to produce kind of standalone themes in WordPress, but when I say standalone themes, I wouldn't say these were high function by any stretch. You know, they were HTML5 or HTML10 templates that we were kind of wrapping PHP tags. So it lost an awful lot of what can be achieved with WordPress, but the design was there, you know. But Catalyst, when I first stumbled across that, I never liked the Catalyst web builder because I hate having a multitude of options. What I want is kind of a style sheet, a functions file, and I like working that way. I don't like dashboard editing, you know, changing heading colors and things like that. So Catalyst had released this vanilla child theme, which I suppose is similar to the Genesis starter theme, but the documentation was really poor for it, and I worked with that for a little bit, but it never had the community that Genesis had behind Genesis. And we had a couple of clients that came to us with Genesis built sites, and I just couldn't really wrap my head around, you know, kind of hooks and it, because for, I suppose, WordPress convention, for me it kind of steered a little bit away from what I was used to doing in WordPress, then my general workflow. Then the Catalyst framework became Cobalt Apps, and they produced the dynamic website builder for Genesis. And I thought, well, you know, you could see that the development community that was behind Genesis, you know, they had, you know, I'd read articles on it, and it just seemed like a natural thing to spend some time learning. And I built the first site with it. It was when Cobalt Apps first released, I suppose, they dynamic website builder. So before they got rid of Catalyst, they released dynamic first off for Genesis, and it was almost like a sideline project. But I kind of knew that that was the way they were going to go, because you only had to look at the Genesis framework and the community that was around it. You know, Eric Ham, you know, as brilliant a developer as he is, you know, you could never compete with the, you know, the amount of man hours that was put into the Genesis framework. So I picked up a site and I decided to build it with Genesis, and that really was my introduction to it, and it wasn't a million miles away from the Catalyst framework. So there were things that were kind of really, you know, reminiscent of the Catalyst framework, so it didn't feel like I was, you know, jumping into something totally new. And like I said, once I'd started, you know, working with the hooks and everything else, it just became second nature, really. It did take me a while to really get to grips with Genesis, and I'd still say that, you know, I'm far from being an expert by any stretch. I cobble my way along very often, but it feels like it fits like a glove now. You know, it's just part of my workflow, and I honestly don't know what I would do if Genesis ever left the arena. You know, I'd feel totally lost. I wouldn't know what to pick up next and what to look at.
Scary thought, actually.
Yes, isn't it?
Genesis 2.1.3 came out yesterday, I think it was. Have you had a chance to look at the small fix that it applies?
I haven't, to be honest with you. I read in the beta release, and what I'm really interested in is in accessibility, because I know that they're working on. I am correct in saying this, aren't I?
That's for the Genesis 2.2 release, but there was a Genesis 2.1.3 release, which is like an essential critical upgrade for or update for. Before you move over to 4.3. It's to do with the shared terms and the fact that 4.3, all shared terms upon update to WordPress 4.3 will now be split. So in terms of the metadata, and specifically for Genesis, it's like your SEO title and description and so on, that the Genesis SEO stuff applies to individual terms. For those term archives, then they would all not quite corrupt, but you'd get some oddities going on if you updated 4.3 and it split it all out, because then it's only a case where you might have, I believe it's only the case where you might have the same term being used in more than one category or more than one taxonomy.
Right.
So it's, yeah, if you've got any 4. What we say 2.1.
I think I've read that wrong in the dashboard this morning, because I only had a fleeting glimpse at it, if I'm honest. I logged into somebody's site this morning just to check, because we recently put out an e-commerce store, and I just wanted to check that everything was okay in there. And the way that I read it was that you had to upgrade to WordPress 4.3 before updating the Genesis theme.
No, for 2.1.3, you should update to Genesis first, because 4.3 upgrade will split those remaining terms.
Thanks for that, Gary. That's great. That is brilliant. Because I read it the other way around, I'll be honest, and chances are I'd have waited then till the 4.3 release and ended up with a broken site. So that's great. Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned the accessibility. In terms of the Genesis 2.2, is that something that's taken your interest then?
It is. It is, because accessibility, I mean, you only got to look at the government websites, for example. They should all be hitting a certain score in terms of accessibility. The Welsh Assembly website is appalling for accessibility, and I've got a friend that works in the Assembly and was responsible for the site. And it seems like, one, the web should be accessible to everybody, and I'm a firm believer in that, you know. So I think that accessibility is massively important, and it's something that's never really been given that much consideration up until this point, but it's something that I've seen kind of creeping up more and more of late. And it's just something that I'd like to really be involved, because, you know, the web should be inclusive, and I think it, for me in particular, it is really important. And I think that, you know, the moment that I can improve accessibility. Am I right in saying that you published a post recently, Gary, on accessibility?
It wasn't a post
Today?
so much as a list of suggestions, shall we say, for a prominent web. It was Chris Limmer's website, basically, that Copyblogger had, I think Rafael had put together. Fantastic design, looks awesome. Functionality-wise, I'm sure it kind of does everything it needs to in terms of meeting site goals. But there was some accessibility issues with it in terms of kind of screen readers and colours and so on. So I'd given I'd asked Rafael first, and he was happy for the feedback to come public. And so I offered those list of suggestions. Most of them were to do with accessibility, how you basically can keep the same design, and you could have skip links, you could have support for screen readers, you can have support for people who are colorblind. Can't remember what else was on there now, but yeah, it was a list within Slack, and then I kind of put that on Twitter as well, just as a general. These are like a top 9 points you can look at in your site to make sure that.
I'll definitely grab a look at that, definitely, because the local authorities and where I'd like to kind of, we do work for the Assembly, and we have done work for you know, our local borough as well, Caerphilly, in the past, and accessibility is a massive thing if you can offer it. So I think it's something that, you know, I think I'd be daft to ignore at this point, because I think it's something that if you really want to start pushing into other places, and particularly the kind of local authority and government-led areas, accessibility is going to play a massive, massive role over the next couple of years, because I know for a fact that in the Assembly at the moment, it's one of the biggest drives they've got, everything to be made accessible within a certain time frame, and they're working on that as we speak. So I think that to get, you know, to start producing work for local authorities, I think it's something to be able to boast on your proposals, that if it's something that they require, it's something that we could service for them then.
Yeah, and for a lot of cases, especially governments, not just kind of the UK, but outside as well, that accessibility of service, which in this case is what the website counts as, is law. So if your clients don't want to get potentially sued by their potential customers, then they have to have an accessible website. So for a developer or an agency who can say, hey, look, did you realize you must have an accessible website? I know how to do that. This is the value it's going to give to you. Then that becomes a huge kind of selling point in terms of kind of securing that lead for work, and kind of getting the reputation that, yes, you produce accessible websites that can meet the laws of a particular country or service area.
Yeah, and you know, I know in this area there's nobody that really, I suppose, gives it that much of a thought then, you know. And I know, you know, people who work in different places, and you know, as you do, you get to know people on your local circuit, don't you? And I know it's something that isn't at the forefront then, you know, of people's kind of proposals. And so I think, yeah, it would be something that's really brilliant to offer, and not just that, something that just helps develop the web as a whole, you know, as it should be.
Yeah. As it happens, and I'm just checking the address now, Rianne, who did a lot of the contribution for Genesis 2.2 in terms of the accessibility improvements, she wrote a fantastic blog post. If you go to genesis-accessible.org and have a look on the blog on there, I think it is, then there's a massive post on there, accessibility changes and features for Genesis 2.2. And it covers what are the new features, how you can enable them in your child theme, and kind of what tweaks you might need to do to the CSS and so on, and why you'd kind of want to include that. And then she's actually, from that as well, is actually producing an ebook about how to do accessible theme development for Genesis. Apparently that's going to be out in the next few weeks. So keep your eye out.
Oh, I've just written that down now, so I'll definitely take a look at that. Thank you, Gary. That's great.
That's all right. Questions coming in. Let's see what we've got. We'll come back to that one. Oh, lots of questions now. Hello to David. He's tuning into UK Genesis for the podcast for the first time. Welcome. Get your questions in. Related question then, we'll carry on that one from Russell. Do you have a preferred accessibility checker?
I'll be honest, no, I haven't. And it's something, as I say, that we're starting to look into now, because, as I say, it's something that I know that we can make real use of in the future. So I'll be honest, with real low level at the moment. I mean, other than kind of basic alt tags and everything else, you know, it's something that's totally new to me, and I can't kind of say otherwise. So no, I haven't got an accessibility.
My preferred one at the moment, which isn't necessarily the best one, but it's the one I've got at the moment, is the Wave extension for Chrome. Wave, what it's called now, Wave toolbar. You just click on the button and that pulls up a whole load of things. Another one is tenon.io, which you could just enter a URL in, and there's various similar sort of sites.
What was that one again? Sorry, Gary.
Wave.
Wave, and what was the other one you mentioned? Sorry.
Tenon.io. tenon.io.
Brilliant.
And there's actually a WordPress plugin, I think it is. I think it's Joe Dolson might have done that one, that will connect to the tenon.io API, right. And it will check I believe it checks the current the current active theme to see if it is accessible or what issues there are. So you don't even have to go off site. You can basically use the development server and check that way.
Excellent.
Craig asks, do you use a starter theme and build from scratch, or do you normally work from StudioPress themes and customize as needed?
Again, it's a bit of a mixture of both. I have got a starter theme, one that I kind of cobbled together over the years, really. And I do also build off kind of existing Genesis child themes then, and I modify and adapt. And it tends really to come down to what the client is looking for, and also budgetary constraint. Because obviously to build something from scratch, as opposed, because I find with the Genesis starter themes, I mean, very often for small businesses, they're brilliant because it takes you about 70–75% of the way, you know, kind of before you even start, really. So you can obviously afford then to keep the costs down dramatically. I think the last website we built actually was off Magazine Pro, and we built an e-commerce store off it, which, you know, it doesn't, I suppose it still does resemble it, but like I say, it just kind of took my fancy at the time. So we do use the Genesis themes, but then for bigger jobs, and where there's a higher level of, I suppose, customizing, and basically where the design is unique to that person, we probably start from our own starter theme. And it's nothing fancy, to be honest with you. It's linked up, it's got some SAS style sheets in there, so we do use SAS. And then just really all of my basic functions and snippets that I've kind of gathered, or, you know, all of the kind of base stuff that I like to use regularly within my themes. I believe, as I recall, I built it off the Genesis starter theme from StudioPress, and it's just kind of grown and evolved as I've kind of discovered new things or new functions, and it's just kind of added to it as I've gone along, really. I use Dash regularly. I don't know if you've come across the Dash app, and it's brilliant because you've obviously got all of the APIs in there. You know, and then you can tag snippet, and it's almost got like a text expander in there as well. Like the text expander app, so, you know, you can use short codes and I use it commonly for things like column classes and, you know, the tedious image tags, that, you know, the stuff that's really mundane to kind of type out. And I use that a lot to save all of my snippets, so anything that isn't contained in the theme, I can then just run through my Dash, or, you know, a lot of snippets I've got kind of memorized to a degree. And then just copy and paste out, really. So I've almost got like a repository, I suppose, of snippets and functions and certain styles and stuff that I use relatively infrequently, and then the frequent things that I use, they generally just comment it out in my starter theme, and I build the theme to kind of a point where I'm happy with it, and it almost resembles the end thing, and then I go through a tidy up process. So I'll start taking out then anything that isn't going to be used, and just tidying up the functions file and the style sheets really.
Do you have like a core plugin that you apply to each website?
I haven't. It's something that I've looked at doing a few times, because we did used to use like a must-use plugin where I had all of my kind of functions put into a must-use plugin to stop clients turning it off. At the moment, everything is contained in the functions file, which makes things a little bit messy and awkward. So yes, bundling it into a plugin, it's one of those things I know I should do, but I kind of haven't as of yet.
Okay, thanks to Richard, he just tweeted that the plugin, the WordPress plugin I was trying to think of that connects to tenant.io is called Access Monitor. So that's that one there. Richard also then goes on to ask, do you do many websites that are English and Welsh, so kind of multilingual websites?
Again, it's something we've just started looking at. I'm fluent in Welsh, it's my first language, and I should be producing sites in Welsh. It's something we've literally just started looking at now, and again, for us in this region, within South Wales, there isn't a huge call for the Welsh language. So even though there's a lot of Welsh schools and Welsh education, there isn't a huge call for Welsh language websites, unless, again, you start looking at local authority work and dealing with public services then, and then there is a call. And there's very few people on the list in terms of providers with the local authorities that can actually deliver Welsh language websites. So yeah, it's something we're looking at, and the first site that we're going to implement it on is our own site, and we've just started. I'm actually testing at the moment the WPML extension from the guys behind Toolset who make types and views. I can't remember the name of the company now. But we've looked at that for language support because apparently it's got very good reviews. I have got somebody that, because even though my Welsh, I can speak Welsh fluently, my grammar isn't the greatest, and unfortunately that's Welsh education. My English isn't particularly good grammatically, and neither is my Welsh, but I can speak both. So I have got somebody that I could use for translation services, but unfortunately, like I say, I couldn't actually write them myself, as I'd write it myself because I wouldn't be confident that the grammar is correct going out. So it is something we're exploring at the moment, and as I say, within the next couple of months, our site is going to be the first one we implement a dual language on.
Okay, I just want to pop in here because I'm realising that the time is passing on, and I want to talk about, we've got a Southwest Genesis meetup happening on the 26th of September at Beckford Arms, that's it. Yes, but if anyone wants any of the details, just go to ukgenesis.co.uk/meetups, and you'll see the details there. And I think you're coming to that. Are you, Gavin? Are you coming to that?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you earlier, Joe, that working within web development in general can be a pretty lonely place. And even though you've got the people that you work with, and it's just nice to meet people that are working and being introduced to Slack. It's just the best thing that's happened to me in the last couple of years, to be honest with you, because it's given me opportunity to speak to people that, one, I've admired for an awful long time. I learned a lot from their blogging and so on and so forth, and also just to meet people that are doing, the same kind of thing, and being able to bounce ideas from people who ask a question. To me, it's invaluable. It's absolutely invaluable. I love it. I absolutely love Slack. So yes, I will be coming down. It'll be nice to meet everybody.
It's going to be really informal. Just turn up, have a drink, have lunch, stay for the afternoon. I think a few people are planning on staying overnight and everything. So just come along. Let us know if you're coming, and just so we know how numbers. So we're going to go into the quick fire round now. So I want to know, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Policeman.
And do you use a Mac or a PC?
Oh, Mac.
And what code editor do you use?
Sublime.
And what do you use to deploy sites then?
A real mixture, to be honest with you. I can't think of the extension we use. Delicious Brains, Migrate, Pro.
Oh.
WP Migrate DB Pro.
Yeah, we use that a lot. Backup Buddy, it purely depends on the job. We should have Git running, but we haven't.
And what do you have any must-use plugins?
Gravity Forms, I love it. I can't get enough of it. And I use Backup Buddy quite frequently. Yoast All-in-One SEO. And I suppose they are my base. You know, they just go into every build, really.
What do you think of the customizer?
The WordPress customizer.
Yeah.
I don't like it, if I'm honest.
And what do you think? Oh, sorry. How do you see WordPress changing in the next 5 years? I
personally think, and I may be wrong in saying this, but I can see it becoming a platform for kind of in-browser application building. And I see it edging towards JavaScript in browser a little bit more. I know that they're working with the API at the moment, aren't they? And they've released the WordPress kind of API. It's been out for quite a while now, hasn't it? But yeah, I think that all of the web, to be honest with you, in general, and WordPress, I think it'll eventually kind of move to this kind of real interactive, almost like web application rather than website, if that makes sense. I might be wrong in saying that, but that's how I kind of envisage it.
And what would you like to see changed with the Genesis framework?
Off the top of my head, I can't really name it. I quite like it. I'm looking forward to the accessibility features, but as it stands, I'm really quite happy with the Genesis framework. So that's not what I can really suggest, to be honest.
And what would you say are the benefits of the Genesis framework to your clients?
For me, it's low overhead every time. I loathe theme forest themes, not because of the development behind it. It's just they're so bloated. And they're so heavy. Like I had one the other day with 5 sliders built into it, and you carrying that overhead constantly, and I hate these drag and drop page builders, and to me it just seems like an unnecessary overhead. I think for me, Genesis, it's just the speed and how light it is by comparison to kind of pre-built themes then.
Okay. And we got a quick question from Jackie. It's like, do you prefer www or non-www domains when you're building sites for people?
Personally, none. I always go for non the standard, but providing that if somebody asks, obviously, for www, then we'll put that in.
Okay.
Why do you prefer non-www? This was a question that Jackie asked on Twitter, but I know she was asking in the Slack group earlier about which people preferred.
Quite genuinely, I haven't got a logical explanation why. I just prefer it. I don't know why. I don't like the www kind of naming convention, so it's just purely a preference. There's no methodology behind it or logic. It's just I prefer it without.
Cool. Okay, just we've got 1 or 2 more minutes. Obviously, you're coming down for the meetup on the 26th of September. Have you had a chance to go to other WordCamps or local WordPress or PHP meetups?
Nothing at all. I tend to shut myself away in a dark room. I'm not a particularly social person, and my wife was quite surprised when I told her that I was going down to this meet because it's really uncharacteristic for me. But I've never really done any other camps or anything else. Never really. I've been involved in kind of forums and that kind of thing, but I've never really gone out and met people working in the same field, other than kind of local networking or whatever it may be. So I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
Great. I really think that's fantastic. That that the Genesis community has enabled you. You want to come and meet us all.
Yeah, it is. And like I say, it would never have happened if it wasn't for the kind of Slack community, really. Like I say, I tend to tuck myself away and kind of work late hours, and I suppose as I'm sure you guys are all the same. You have a tendency to withdraw yourself from kind of general civilization, Monday to Friday, and then come out on the weekend. So it will be nice to actually spend time with people and not just that, I find I bore people, people just haven't got the same interests as me. So I'll go out, and I'm there, they're all talking about the football or the rugby, and I'm there talking about JavaScript, and it never, so me and social events, we don't really go down all that well, so it'd be nice to kind of speak to people who are on the same kind of playing field,
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we'll start to wrap up then. Who would you like to see on the podcast in the future?
There's one gentleman in particular that I love his articles, and I think I put the link on Slack the other day, and that's Nick the Geek. I don't know his second name. I think he'd be fantastic on the Genesis podcast if you could get him, but I know he's US based, isn't he?
Yeah. Anybody from the UK that you can think of off the top of your head?
To be honest with you, I'm not a massive, I don't really know that many people in the community other than the little Slack group, so I find it hard to recommend anybody that I would like to see.
Yep, and that's one of the reasons why this kind of podcast and this UK Genesis kind of entity exists anyway, is to try and increase the exposure of everybody else, because we know we're all out there, but until we've had the chance to meet everybody, you don't know who they are or where they are or what their skill set is. So, excuse me, so that's what it's for. So, right then. So, where can we find you online?
The main web address is orangedrop.co.uk. So that's the primary web address. Other than that, really, it's hanging around forums. That's generally where I spend most of my time. But yeah, orangedrop.co.uk is the main website web address.
And Twitter?
At orangedropsw.
For South Wales,
so
is that?
It's a capital O and a capital D.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for joining in. Our guest in the next couple of weeks is just to show that we are definitely kind of UK based, not England based, and obviously being in Wales today, we're going up to Scotland in the next couple of weeks. So whatever date that is, 26th of August. Yep, 26th of August. We've got Craig Simpson joining us then. So thank you very much for joining us today, Gavin.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for co-hosting, Joe.
You're welcome.
And thank you much to our listeners and for your fantastic questions that are coming in. Really is helpful. Really appreciate that. Any final words from everybody?
No.
No? All quiet, all good. Everyone's happy. In which case then we'll say thank you very much and have a good couple of weeks, and we'll see you then. Cheers. Bye-bye.